What's going on, everyone? Welcome to American Advocates. This will be episode 123, coming to you live on June 18th, 2026. It's Thursday, and we've got a lot to discuss today, taking a shift mostly, though there's still more Iran war news updates to give, of course, but that's going to lead for a change lead into a change that my moderator lifeguard will be thrilled to hear about. It's going to lead us into more of a focus on our politicians here in America, domestic affairs happening, really internal affairs happening within the Trump administration that are really not so secretive. A lot of public statements being made, a major divide, a major fraction in the Trump administration, and inside of all of MAGA, spreading all the way down to just the average everyday American MAGA or Republican voter at this point. Everyone now is seemingly becoming a little bit more outspoken about Israel and where they stand. The tide seems to be turning in some ways, with sides almost being determined right now, a line in the sand perhaps being drawn right now. But I'm also going to explain to you just the very realistic situation that we're going to find ourselves in when it comes to the 2028 GOP primaries, for the presidential primaries, because you may look at this right now and you may hear what I'm going to report to you over the course of this episode in regards to what J.D. Vance has been saying about Israel, and you may think maybe there's a silver lining to J.D. Vance running for president in 2028. Maybe he is the guy after all. And I'm going to tell you right now, spoiler alert, no, he isn't. Though he is being somewhat useful and he is creating a new spark that needed to happen. So we'll take what we can get. But I am ultimately here to remind you of several things about J.D. Vance and point out a lot about Marco Rubio as well, because that is kind of where the divide is going to be playing out the most, where we're going to see this divide affect the Republican Party, the establishment GOP, MAGA, etc., the Trump administration for that matter the most, will be between J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, and there's a lot to discuss regarding that. So first and foremost, be sure to like the stream, double tap your phone screens, hit that thumbs up button if you'd be so kind before we start. Help encourage the YouTube algorithm to push this channel and show out to wider audiences who need to see and hear this kind of reporting. Also, be sure to subscribe to American Advocates if this is not your first time here, and consider joining our new membership program here on this channel. Membership program is now active, and members exclusive content has already begun rolling out. You saw it today, most likely in the form of my community tabs page post announcement about the difference between the first and second tier membership program, and many more future membership exclusive posts will be rolling out today. My long form video I uploaded today had an exclusive window for members to comment on first before it went live to the rest of the subscribers who aren't members as well, and there will be exclusive members videos being released in the future that only members will have access to. So consider joining the membership program on this channel if you are a fan of this channel thus far. But that leads me right into what I want to do today. First, let me sip some water. Gotta stay hydrated. It's summer. Okay, breaking news. Breaking news developing as I was preparing to go live here. I already knew I wanted to talk about this, but we have an update on the story I wanted to talk about that was featured in the title, of course. Iran suspending the Memorandum of Understanding over continued strikes in Lebanon by Israel. And the breaking news that was coming in as I was preparing for this show, as of just a few moments ago, literally, is that now officials are reporting that Vice President J.D. Vance has canceled his trip to Switzerland, which is where this ceremonious signing of the Memorandum of Understanding set to take place between our Vice President J.D. Vance and the Iranian Speaker of the Parliament, Mohammad Ghalibaf, was set to take place tomorrow. And so this was going to be the ceremonious signing. For all intents and purposes, the Memorandum of Understanding could be or really should be in effect already. We received word that on Monday there was an e-signing of the MOU with President Donald Trump and Iran electronically, and then yesterday actually President Trump actually sort of jumped the gun on it and didn't wait for the ceremonious signing to sign it himself. He just went ahead and signed it yesterday, making it official. We can almost see why, perhaps, actually. This is literally just a revelation occurring to me in real time right now. We can almost see why, because people were confused a little bit. They said, oh, wow, Trump didn't even wait until the ceremony of signing was over before he signed it. He just signed it yesterday in the big Sharpie. Now, it almost makes sense why he would do that. Because you have to understand something. Yes, what we woke up to news-wise today was that the reports were coming in that there were more bombing runs, more strikes on Lebanon carried out by Israel. And Iran is fuming over this. And now they've threatened to pause all of it and no longer recognize the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, until Trump reigns in Israel. And you have to understand something. Israel, though they are defiant, because of how closely we work with Israel, I would actually be shocked if the Trump administration didn't at least have some sort of heads up or warning or notice ahead of time that Israel was going to do what they did in Lebanon over yesterday evening. So as a result of that, you got to ask yourself, was Trump just jumping the gun out of pure nerves, knowing that he's not going to fully reign in Israel and knowing that they're going to sabotage this or do their best to, so he wanted to just get the official signing over with his Sharpie yesterday? You got to ask yourself that, because he does that yesterday. Then last night, Israel just bombs the fuck out of Lebanon again, and this morning Iran is pissed. And they're now saying, we've suspended the MOU. We don't recognize it anymore. You're not doing what we wanted you to do with Israel. Literally, I pointed this out yesterday for this reason, and I've been warning everybody, don't get your hopes up when it comes to actual peace, because the MOU is not a peace treaty. The MOU is just literally an understanding of both countries. That it's literally both countries saying, we understand that we want to come to an understanding. That's literally what it is. It's like an official super ceasefire, and it's an official acknowledgement of the desire for peace. Let's work towards peace. Let's actually negotiate. That's all that this is. And we seemingly can't even fully get on board and get started on that because of Israel. So this is what I was warning about, and I for that reason deliberately pointed out that the first term in the Memorandum of Understanding literally includes Lebanon's sovereignty and desire for self-defense, safety, and peace with Israel 3 times. Lebanon is mentioned 3 times in the first term of the MOU. So that's why I pointed all this out, and now we wake up to the news today. Israel did it anyway. Iran is pissed. Iran won't tolerate it, and this is still part of their 5D chess game I've accurately explained on this channel in the past, where they are playing 5D chess against Israel using Trump as their ultimate chess piece. Trump is like their queen piece, and they're so effectively wielding him against Israel. I've been saying this since April. I've been telling you, listen, I am the smartest, most analytical, strategically brilliant commentator on YouTube you'll ever hope to come across, and I actually do love playing chess, which is why I understand how this is playing out. And that's what I've been explaining since April. I've been explaining this. The MAGA chuds and cultists want to explain to you that this has been a 5D chess game being played by Trump against China using Iran the entire time. Completely false. Couldn't be further from the truth. Not accurate whatsoever. China's laughing at all of this. They're barely hurt by this at all. And now Iran is poised to become a 4th emerging global power, depending on how they proceed forward after now receiving tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars over the course of the next several years. So they were completely wrong. The 5D chess game that's actually being played out is Iran playing it against Israel using Trump to do it. And they're still doing it right now. And that's why it was written into the MOU the way that it was. Because this has always been the plan by Iran. They want to continue to expose Israel as being a warmongering nation. And in doing so, they turn the world against Israel, they turn Americans against Israel more, and now they're really causing a massive divide and fracture within the Trump administration internally, and now not so publicly, because after all of this news, combined with Israel's continuous defiance and actions it's literally Israel sabotaging peace. And I've explained several times how Israel literally doesn't want peace. They don't want it. It doesn't benefit them for there to be peace in the Middle East. Israel literally profits less or loses money when there's peace. Their entire nation is set up for war. It's the actual purpose of Israel even existing currently, is to ensure that there is no peace in the Middle East and that there is constant war and tension. That is where Israel thrives. And we've seen that economically out of them. Their inflation went down in March after the start of this war. Their shekel started doing infinitely better. It was hitting new 30-year highs in performances, their shekel, as opposed to our dollar, which was crashing. Our inflation was soaring. Our stock market has somehow been doing good, but not helping the average everyday American. Meanwhile, when peace was announced, or this memorandum of understanding was announced, the Israeli stock market all tanked. 80% red for the Israeli stock market. That's for a reason. And it's so obvious, though, Israel now. Their actions, their sabotaging of peace, their deliberate sabotaging of peace is so obvious and so public, and so many people more than ever are recognizing this, that the Trump administration is literally splitting apart at the seams. So much to go over today. First, you had the criticisms of the MOU that President Donald Trump signed by neocons like Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz had this to say about it, and this was ultimately called out by J.D. Vance. So Ted Cruz had this to say. He said, "What has been released so far suggests, unfortunately, the president is getting, I think, very poor advice when it comes to this deal. History teaches that giving billions of dollars to theocratic lunatics who want to murder us is a bad idea. Under the terms of what's been released, somewhere between 10 billion and 30 billion will flow to the Ayatollah immediately, before they make even a single nuclear concession. I think that's ill-advised. That money, if it goes to the Ayatollah, will go to fund terrorists trying to kill Americans, and weapons that will be used to try to kill Americans. And it also appears to formalize a permanent role for the Islamic regime controlling the Strait of Hormuz. It's difficult to see what possible benefit to America could come from that." He also went on and continued, "President Trump was exactly right to initiate military action against Iran because for 47 years, the regime has been waging war against America, has been the world's leading funder of terrorism, and has been murdering Americans for 47 years. I can't even finish reading that one straight. And has been murdering Americans for 47 years. Nearly 1,000 Americans have been murdered by the Ayatollah and the mullahs. That is why the president acted as strong commander-in-chief to take out their military capacity. It is not remotely in America's interest for us to pay to rebuild that capacity that we just took out." Now, it wasn't Vance calling this out, actually. It was Don Jr., the son, and he said, "The only problem with this quote is that Ted Cruz is lying through his teeth about the deal. We're not giving them a cent, and he knows that. Using fake news about a peace deal to undermine Donald Trump is the opposite of MAGA." And so this is the split now. Now, here's the deal. Don Jr., though I love to see it, and I love to see some absolute moron like Ted Cruz being destroyed here, Don Jr. is somewhat wrong as well, and he was actually fact-checked. He was community noted on X for this reply. Readers add context that says the Trump administration states the Iran deal provides no direct U.S. funds, not a cent. However, it includes sanctions relief, access to frozen Iranian assets, oil sales, and $300 billion investment fund from other nations. Ted Cruz has expressed deep concern over these terms. So this is all happening right now, and it kept going on from there. Fox News wound up posting this compilation of all of these politicians, both Democrat and Republican alike, criticizing this as well. And so they captured, for instance, here she is, Pocahontas. Everyone's favorite politician, Pocahontas. Probably the worst actor on the Democrat side of the aisle, I will say, but nevertheless, take a listen.
Whole nuclear deal now, no better than what we had back in 2015, back when Barack Obama cut the deal. And that's where Donald Trump winds us up after all of this. What an embarrassment.
What an embarrassment. It goes on to show them trying to get Rand Paul to make a statement. He just walks away, doesn't say anything. Literally just, he's going up the stairs in this.
We went to war for what? The idea of
oh, sorry.
Doing something in the Straits of Hormuz. The Straits were being used peacefully before our invasion, and now we have to negotiate they'll be used peacefully in the future.
He says, we went to war for what? The Straits of Hormuz were being used peacefully before all of this, and now we have to negotiate for them to be safe afterwards. Then we have Adam Schiff, who probably should be in prison, and ironically isn't, and now gets to live to defy Trump publicly over the deal.
It's going to get access to its frozen assets, and what is Iran giving up for this? Nothing. Nothing, they're merely reaffirming what they've said before about nuclear weapons.
And that's super true as well. So Fox News put that out. Adam Schiff says they're going to get all their unfrozen assets, and what are they giving up? What are they giving us? Nothing. And this is true. I've broken this down. I don't care if it's coming from Adam Schiff, Rand Paul, any Republican or Democrat. A lot of this is true. And I explained yesterday that there's a lot of differences in perception over this deal. So most Americans, most people in general, are not too thrilled about this memorandum of understanding or what lies within it. However, the sides are splitting over what the end result will be, because the America Firsters at this point, I would include myself in that group, are thrilled at least at the proposition of pulling out of the Middle East now and being done. No matter what the cost of that is now, we're done. This is over with. Yes, the United States lost. Yes, Trump is completely surrendering to Iran. Yes, it's very bitter. Yes, it has serious global economic implications, global implications in general. I've explained all of that in the past. The Pax Americana could be threatened because of this. The global economy might take a different shape because of this as a result of the Pax Americana being jeopardized. Our petrodollar could be jeopardized in some ways. Our economy isn't going to bounce back as quick as Trump likes. There's so much that I could just spend another 2 hours going over when it comes to what the long-term implications and effects of this are going to be. But this was a complete surrender by President Donald Trump, who has bent the knee to Iran after unsuccessfully waging war with them. This is a complete loss, and there's no other way to frame it. But the America Firsters are happy, not because of that, not because of the ruined image of America because of this, or because of the damage to our military credibility and American reputation, but we are happy that finally Trump has recognized the need to pull out of this unwinnable war. Another Middle East forever foreign war that only serves the military industrial complex. And this is ultimately good in regards, at least to that. We can leave the region now and get back to focusing on the actual good promises Trump made when it came to domestic issues. How about we focus on immigration again? How about we focus on the economy again? How about we deal with inflation? How about we deal with the national debt? And I'm not saying that he's going to do that, by the way. I hope that he does. That's why I'm a conservative and why I would have supported him. I hope that that's what happens, but I can't say that he will. Who knows what the future holds? But what we do know is this finally opens the window for the president to focus on his country rather than on Israel, rather than on another foreign country, rather than on meddling in a useless forever foreign war that's centered around a holy war, centered around two religions that are opposite and really represent both in different ways the antithesis of what America is supposed to be anyway. And so that's why the America Firsters are happy. We're not happy about the details of the MOU or the perception of it or what this means for America when it comes to our reputation and how it looks. It's a bitter loss for the United States, and that sucks. But we're at least happy at the end result. Meanwhile, you have the Israel Firsters, the Zionists, all of the people that are in AIPAC's pocket, and the neocons in general, the boomer cons who worship Israel. They don't pray to Christ, they pray to Israel. They're God's chosen people, the apple of God's eyes. Yeah, fuck you. And these are the people that are both disappointed with the details of the MOU, like the America Firsters, but also disappointed with what it means, which obviously it means pulling out of the region. It actually means no more war for Israel. It actually means, sorry, you little cucked Israel-worshipping boomer scum, but no, your children and grandchildren are actually not going to go get their legs blown off by Iranian IEDs to serve Israel. Sorry, so sorry. I know you did your best to fuck over your own children and grandchildren with the housing market and your greed and your scum ways when it comes to the economy, completely taking advantage and cashing in for your own benefit at the expense of your children, you locust generation scum. But actually, no. We're not going to now be sent overseas to fight and die for Israel. Sorry to tell you. We're not going to be blowing up the Arabs. Not happening. We're leaving the region. I know the prospect of peace is almost as upsetting to a neocon or a boomer as it is to Israel, but that's what's happening, and that's why they're fuming over this. Because not only do they recognize how bad it makes America look and what it means for us when it comes to the United States surrendering to Iran, but it also, the end result is not favorable or desirable to Israel or to them in general. So that's the difference. And I explained that yesterday, and we're seeing the fallout of that now with all of this. All of this right now. Now, Ben Shapiro, for instance, he's losing his mind over this. Take a listen to a clip from his show today. He was a big supporter of this war, not surprisingly, every step of the way. Actually, stop everything. Before we play the Ben Shapiro clip, I did not miss that. Super chat. Thank you, Quagula, for the $5 super chat tariff to help balance out the chat deficit of stupidity that's being created in here. And he says, "What is America? Why don't you tell us in your own words, since you're conservative, regale us." America is a people. America is not an idea. In short, America is a people. It is an extension of Europe. It was founded by strictly white European men who sailed overseas in basically an attempt to form a new colony, which is what we did. We then declared our independence from Britain, the UK, Europe in general, and in doing so created the country that it now is. We united these lands and turned them into the United States of America, and in doing so, we created this now benevolent country that we are, that is more free than any other country, in my opinion, and potentially more prosperous than any other country, if it weren't for the neocons and the liberals and everything else ruining it. So America is, in my opinion, the best country in the world. Even now, nothing beats America, in my opinion. Even now, I drink out of my America water bottle with pride. But yes, America is a people, and it was always originally a predominantly white European people, and it's always supposed to be that way. That's in short what America is. Hopefully that answers your question. Anyways, Ben Shapiro had this to say about the Trump MOU. The meltdown is glorious.
I'm noticing that Mohammed Khalibaf, who will apparently on Friday be literally in a photo op with the Vice President of the United States. I cannot express to you how stomach turning that is. I don't care who the Vice President is. I don't care who the President is. Leaders of the United States of America in a photo op with a mass murdering terrorist supporter like Mohammed Khalibaf shaking hands 6 months after he blew away 42,000 innocent people in the streets, and weeks after his administration was firing missiles at literally all of our allies in the region, and continues to support every terrorist group in the region, and is currently continuing to control the strait. Like right now, it is not fully open for business, unless the Iranians have, quote unquote, decided it is.
All right, so take a listen to that and understand what Ben Shapiro is saying. It is actually quite hilarious. Oy vey, says Luke Baker. Oy vey, this is worse than the sworn across. I can't believe this. Well, believe it, Ben. And this is actually what peace looks like. And that's what's so funny about the rant. It really does prove, first and foremost, what Ben Shapiro is. He's an Israeli nationalist. He doesn't give a flying fuck about America. He just likes living here so that he can do his gay little stupid ass show in the safety of America rather than having to run and hide perpetually in the bunkers of Israel as Israel continues to instigate and literally antagonize all of their neighbors all of the time. And then upon receiving retaliation from those neighbors, cries out as victims while sending all of their people to live in squalor half the time in these bunkers. Ben Shapiro can't thrive there, but he will defend the country nonetheless from the safety of America. And his only focus over the past decade has literally transformed from at least pretending to be an American patriot, conservative, intellectual debater type to now literally just, how's this helping Israel? It's not. That's why it's a problem. Trump is wrong. We need to help Israel. This doesn't help Israel. And beyond that, today what we're seeing out of him is him talking about how it's disgusting that there's going to be inevitably a photo op, which got canceled anyway because of Israel. So I guess in some ways Ben got his way so far. But it would have been a photo op between Mohammed Ghalibaf, the head speaker of the Iranian parliament, and Vice President J.D. Vance. And he says, this is disgusting. They would shake hands with him and there'd be a photograph and they'd be signing something together. Yeah, Ben, I know the country you love doesn't ever want peace and can't ever imagine being in that circumstance because they're little warmongering whores and their only goal is the Greater Israel Project and expansion throughout the Middle East and and bending these people, their neighbors, into either subservience or complete annihilation. no peace. I know that that's not how it works over in your beloved little Israel, but for the rest of the world, yeah, that's actually what peace looks like. That's what a peace deal looks like, Ben Shapiro. It looks like two world leaders in opposition to each other that are somewhat powerful to some degree, varying degrees, sitting down across from each other at a table after incidents like this, which could have been avoided and should have been, but weren't. And what's done is done. And now they sit down and they shake hands and they say, hey, this was dumb. And it's over now, and we're going to make it right, and we're going to move on from here. And then there's a photo op now because it's 2026. It's posted on social media. There's a signature, there's a signing event, it's ceremonious. And then going forward, there's this concept called peace that both countries now strive towards. I know that's very foreign and pretty much incomprehensible to the average Jew who supports Israel and Zionism and to the Israeli government in general, but that is how actually things are supposed to work. So I found that fascinating as well. That's part of the cracks that are showing. And really what we're seeing here on the other side, conversely, Vice President J.D. Vance going off today, making several different statements in regards to some of the reports that he's getting. He references an Axios article that was discussing how Benjamin Netanyahu is beside himself over in Israel, fuming over this deal, furious over it in general. And so he had this to say in regards to that. And really what Vance finally addressed today that got him praise from both Democrats and some America First Republicans alike is Vance is just addressing the attitude of Israel, the ego, the arrogance, the entitlement is really what it is. And he calls it out directly right here.
To completion. Now, I saw the Axios report, that Netanyahu is fuming. That's not reflective of the conversations that I've had with him, but maybe he's saying something to somebody else that he's not saying to me. What I will say, and this does bother me, is that you've seen people within Bibi's cabinet who have come out and attacked the deal, and in some ways very personally attacked the President of the United States. And I guess my message to them would be twofold. Number one, Donald J. Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time. And he happens to be the head of state of the world superpower. If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world.
Beautiful point. And like I explained at the beginning of this episode, from here, we're going to get into the American political system here, our expectations for 2028. I'm going to do that in a couple of minutes, but we're going to get into that and this fracture, what it's leading to, what it means, how the GOP is going to be shaping up in 2028, the divide, the lines in the sand, etc. And I'm going to get into that, and I'm going to preface that by saying, once again, J.D. Vance is not our guy, and I'll say that over and over again. We can celebrate what he's saying, though, because it's true, it needs to be said, and quite honestly, it's refreshing to hear a politician in power actually say this and put Israel literally in their place, which is, yes, very far beneath America, where they belong. Israel, without us, is nothing. Conversely, though, Mike Huckabee is actually saying the opposite. Now, Mike Huckabee, obviously, is what? Mike Huckabee is the ambassador, the United States ambassador to Israel. And if you don't know what that means, Mike Huckabee is tasked and assigned the actual goal of representing American interests to Israel. Right? This is what Huckabee's supposed to be doing. He's supposed to go to Israel and say, America wants this, and we expect this. So if anything, Huckabee should be leading the charge when it comes to siding with Vance, and in some cases right now, even, as it seems so far, Trump himself, who's been criticizing Israel. Huckabee should be right there with them as a trio and saying, yeah, this is ridiculous. And I talk with Israel all of the time, and they need to get it together, and they need to get in line. But that's not what Huckabee does. And so this is what Huckabee had to say. But before we play that, we got to stop everything here because once again, massive super chat coming in, $10 super chat tariff from Farouz Kui. Hopefully I'm saying that right. We'll just call you Faraz. How's that? Faraz 4329, and he says, "As an Iranian who opposes the regime, I've changed my mind. This war won't free Iran, it only kills us. Americans and Iranians share interests in peace while Israel benefits from endless war." Very true. And listen, hopefully you're somewhere safe if you're saying that. I am not an Iranian regime sympathizer. I do not support the IRGC whatsoever. I'm an American firster kind of guy. I'm an American advocate. It's the name of my channel. So I am always here to remind people, and no offense, I'm not here to stick up for Iran or advocate for Iranians. Your country and your people's problems are your own. And what I do say for sure is, by the way, as somebody who doesn't sympathize with the IRGC, I hope we get to see the day where the Iranian people overthrow that regime and take control back of their own country. But it does have to come from you guys. And I said that at the start of this war because the whole regime change topic was being discussed by the Trump administration. And we all know that the regime change was Israel's goal. We really shouldn't have too much of a reason to care about the regime over there being so far away from Iran as we are. But I did say that, and I said regime change doesn't work, ever. Never. It's actually in the words of the late great Charlie Kirk here who expressed this. And Charlie Kirk always said it has to come from the ground up. You can't do regime change from the top down, especially if the top is airstrikes. Airstrikes won't accomplish anything, and that's all we were prepared to do as the United States in this circumstance. Airstrikes, naval strikes from the sea, etc. And that's effective, and it's intimidating, and it causes damage. And if you sustain that long enough, maybe there was a chance you bend the IRGC to your will. But I had expressed early on, these are zealots. The IRGC are the zealots, and they're hardcore. They're devoted to their religion, and they would never surrender. And the regime change has to come from the people. As sad as that may be, it has to be an organic uprising. And so you're spot on, and that's why this Iranian here literally says this. He said, "This war won't free Iran; it only kills us." That's the nature of war, sadly. Innocent people always get harmed during war in many different ways, and so do Americans. Every time America wages these foreign wars, Americans never wind up more prosperous or more free after a war. We've seen that play out now, even with this short 100 and whatever day war that it is. We are less free and way less prosperous than we were before it. And then overseas, where the bombing's actually happening, yes, sadly, innocent people die. And that's tragic. And now there's nothing to show for it. But with that being said, I thank you for your $10 super chat tariff, Faraz. Seriously, I appreciate the support, and I wish you the best. I say that sincerely, and I hope you're somewhere safe as you sent that. So thank you for that, though. Seriously. Okay. Let me play Mike Huckabee here, get back on point. So Mike Huckabee, conversely to J.D. Vance, who puts Israel in his place, I played the clip. J.D. Vance literally saying, hey, maybe it's not a great idea to turn on the only country that has your back anymore. Literally just putting it out there and reminding Israel, most of the rest of the world fucking hates you now, Israel. And I've been reporting on that. Spain despises them. I believe it was in Spain where they tore down the Benjamin Netanyahu wax statue, bashed its head in. Over in Mexico, I believe it was, we saw Mexicans dancing on an Israeli flag with muddy boots, and then they lit it on fire afterwards. We've seen Italy take a complete 180 turn on Israel, with Giorgia Meloni leading the charge and insisting that she wouldn't send any more foreign aid over to Israel, while Benjamin Netanyahu is the prime minister of it, because she cited her Christian religion and belief. She said, I am a Christian, and I won't support Israel because of their war crimes. That's Italy. We've seen France take a harder stance on Israel, several other countries. So that is a completely accurate statement by the vice president, and a very dutiful and necessary reminder on his part to Israel that, yeah, you know what, you really do need us. And he goes deeper into that in a second, I'll get to it. You really do need us, and we're the only one that likes you, or really at this point, we don't even like Israel, to be honest with you. The young generations despise Israel. But we're the only ones, as it stands right now, unfortunately, still willing to support them. So maybe, yes, if Benjamin Netanyahu behind the scenes is fuming and insulting Trump and trying to sabotage peace, which we clearly saw work today, as it was again reported that Iran has literally paused the MOU and they don't recognize it anymore. And the Switzerland meeting between Vance and Galibaf canceled. Vance is not flying out there. So it worked. They sabotaged peace. And maybe they shouldn't be, since they're literally trying to harm the only country that's willing to back and support them at all anymore. And maybe we shouldn't be willing to back and support them is really the question and really the statement that should be made now. But that being said, Huckabee, conversely, while J.D. Vance is reminding Israel how desperate they are to maintain peace and an alliance with America, Huckabee, our ambassador to Israel, who's supposed to represent our interest to Israel, he had this to say about Israel.
It's also my job to represent the importance of Israel to the United States. This is just another reminder that it is your heritage, without a doubt. But, Minister, it is also the heritage of the United States. Without Israel, without the Jewish Foundation, there would not be an America.
So, this man clearly doesn't even understand his job. He says, it's my job to represent the interest of Israel, or my job to represent the importance of Israel to the United States, and then says without Israel, there wouldn't be a United States. This is who's in our government currently. This is who works for the Trump administration, and this is who's representing American interest to Israel. Not only is that just disgusting to hear, and traitorous, really, but it's factually completely incorrect. We all know the truth. I think almost everybody does if they're being honest with themselves. If I snapped my fingers right now, and with that snap, that Thanos snap, I have all the Infinity Stones, and my wish... I won't even finish saying, I snap my fingers, and boom, Israel's gone. Does America disappear without Israel? Are we all of a sudden in some grave danger and we can't exist or support ourselves or defend ourselves now that Israel's gone? No, America's doing just fine. Arguably, probably, hypothetically, we're actually going to start doing a lot better. Conversely, I have that gauntlet. I snap my fingers. America's gone. Well, what happens to Israel then? If America disappears tonight, what happens to Israel tomorrow? Well, they're gone too. Not because I snap my fingers to make them disappear next, but because every other country realizes Big Brother is no longer a factor. This is very obvious to anybody that understands how this works. Nevertheless, that's what Huckabee's stance is on that. And amazingly, indirectly so, Vance went on to basically dispel this notion as well. And in doing so, continued to put Israel in its place, because after he stated that maybe they shouldn't turn on the only ally they have left in this world, and they shouldn't sabotage our efforts for peace and work to undermine us and criticize us, he then, Vice President Vance, had this to say.
And the second message I would give to some of those cabinet members, Bibi, to his credit, has not gone down this path, but to some of these cabinet members in Israel who are attacking the President of the United States, the other thing that I would say is that over the last 3 months, 2/3 of the defensive weapons that have protected your homeland have been built by American hands and paid for by American tax dollars. The problem for Israel is not Donald J. Trump. And anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the President of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation that country is in.
2/3 over the last 3.5 months of this war playing out and of all the fury that has been unleashed on Israel as a result by the IRGC and the Houthis, etc. 3.5 months, Hezbollah included for that matter, over the last 3.5 months, 67% of Israel's defense came from America, either from taxpayer funding, which should outrage you, or just in general from our equipment being expended on their defense, our Patriot interceptor missiles, our THAAD systems, which should also outrage you. And so in one sense, J.D. Vance actually kind of doesn't do himself a favor by being so honest. But in another sense, I appreciate the sentiment of really reminding Israel just how bad their circumstances are without us. So unlike what Mike Huckabee has to say, yes, as a matter of fact, America would not only be doing fine without Israel, probably it would be doing better. But conversely, in accordance with what the vice president had to say today, finally, good to see somebody with some balls in power, Israel would not be doing well without us. They probably would cease to exist very quickly without us. And we truly are the only country left in supporting them. And that might be changing very soon anyway as well. But as it stands right now, it is the truth. And so it was good to see that. Now, really, really what that leads me to as well here is, in response to Israel continuing to work against peace, basically, and defy Iran's red line, and bomb Lebanon anyway, J.D. Vance responded to that too. So I'm going to play that for you. But stop everything. I know there was a super chat tariff that came in here from Yo-Yo Duh. Good to see you back here, Yo-Yo Duh. A $5 super chat tariff. Appreciate it. And he says, keep doing what you are doing. I am happy to support your channel when I pop in. I appreciate that a lot, Yo-Yo Duh. Thank you so much for that. Not to try to sell you into spending more of your money, but I should make somebody like you, I should alert somebody like you to the fact that I did create a membership program on this channel. And this will be an advertisement for all, just for the next 10 seconds. Memberships are now active on this channel, so if you are enjoying this content, I just started it last night, but there's going to be a lot of members exclusive content being uploaded on this channel in the future, so consider joining if you really are that happy with my channel. And even if you don't, I appreciate the compliment and the positivity. That's not always something that you're used to as a political commentator on YouTube, especially when you're speaking the truth like I am, so brilliantly and accurately, might I add. But thank you for that, Yo-Yo Duh, for the $5. I really appreciate that. Anyways, in response to this, going back to what I reported early on, Israel sabotaged all of this, and they did it successfully. Again, somewhat. Iran has basically said, we no longer recognize the MOU because of the bombing strikes, whatever they were, on Lebanon last night. The red line Iran said, do not cross. Israel crossed again. Surprise, surprise. J.D. Vance has responded to that as well, and he's not happy. He's actually pretty pissed. So this is what he had to say in regards to that as well.
Could withdraw from another country the right of self-defense. Israel has the right to defend itself, but fundamentally, the Israelis, just like everybody else, have to respect this peace process that is fundamentally good for them and good for the entire region. What the president gets grown frustrated sometimes is that we seem to be right on the cusp of a major breakthrough in the agreement, and then all of a sudden there's a major explosion that goes off in a civilian population center in Beirut, and a lot of people who have nothing to do with Hezbollah lose their lives. That's not acceptable. That's the sort of thing that we've asked for closer coordination so that we ensure it doesn't happen.
So he's calling it out for what it is. And before this was done, because this was done this morning at the White House by Vice President Vance, yesterday we saw Trump echo the same sentiments over at the G7 in France, where he also said, 2 drones launched by Hezbollah 2 or 3 days prior, even in some cases, or 24 hours prior to a peace deal being announced or a ceasefire being proposed. Hezbollah will have launched drones either beforehand or maybe even after, because they're no saints either. But to his point, he says Hezbollah will launch 2 one-way drones that will crash in a desert over in Israel, and then Israel will respond by leveling an entire 13-story apartment complex in southern Beirut, a capital city of Lebanon, which is a 40% Christian country. And Trump would go on to say, you can't tell me that was an apartment complex full of Hezbollah. It can't be so. And this is, by the way, what we call logic. And it was once again refreshing to hear a world leader, mainly an American president, say the truth so openly about Israel. Now, the next day, we see Vice President Vance this morning, after he found out once again about Israel sabotaging peace and continuing to strike Hezbollah in Lebanon. He says that, and he says, it's unacceptable what they're doing. And that's because it is. And it's very see-through now. And Israel, out of their sheer desperation to keep the war going for the sake of their own interests in achieving the greater Israel nation, which is all they care about. They only care about furthering their own agenda. They're the most selfish, despicable, disgusting nation on this earth. They shouldn't probably exist even, and they do. And they only exist to sow chaos and violence in the Middle East. That is their goal. And they're doing it. And they won't stop. And that's the problem. And so Vance addressed that. And in addition to that, he'd go on a separate incident here. I found this clip interesting. I'm going to play it as well. He also raises another very valid point when it comes to Israel and basically their status in the world.
But yeah, you've seen people in their system, Ben Gvir and Smotrich, who have attacked the deal. And I guess my response to them would be, what is your exact proposal? And, you're a country of 9 million people. You can't just kill your way out of solving every single national security problem that you have.
Completely and also factually accurate. They are a tiny country with a small population, and they're very, very dependent on the United States. They're actually completely dependent on us when it comes to their advancements in the Middle East, when it comes to their expansionist goals, the land promised to them 3,000 years ago by God, because they still believe that covenant is active. And so without us, they're nothing, and they can't accomplish any of this, and they can't even survive without us. And that's, again, goes back to the point of why is this happening, and why are we allowing this? So really all of this comes back to say this is the split happening right now. You have our own U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, spreading some nonsense about how America owes Israel everything, which in doing so just exposes even more the arrogant and disgusting entitlement of the Jewish people over in Israel, these Zionist pigs. It just exposes it, and it continues to expose it, because we don't owe Israel anything. We've given them way more than what they deserve. They owe us everything, but they don't act like it. It's like being in an abusive relationship with a narcissistic spouse. They always want you to feel like they're doing a lot for you, but in truth, they're not only doing nothing for you, but they're actually taking as much as they can in the process. That's what Israel does. And they're so self-motivated and driven towards their own goals that they don't care who's impacted by it. It's all about them. And you have Mike Huckabee, and you have Ted Cruz, and you have all of these other neocons and these boomers in office right now who are completely in favor of supporting Israel and going to war with Iran if they insist. Meanwhile, then you have J.D. Vance, and in some cases, like I've explained, Donald Trump, and perhaps more in the future, in the very near future, who are now speaking out against this and criticizing Israel openly. And they're defying, this is the split, and it's happening in the Trump administration right now, and it's going to have serious implications for MAGA as a whole. But stop everything. Another $5 super chat tariff has come in from Yo-Yo Duh. Again, thank you for the second one. I appreciate that. And he says, remember last year when a ceasefire was announced during the 12-day war, Israel went all out. Yes, I do remember that. Just before it went into effect, Israel set the precedent. Yeah, exactly. Point that out. I remember observing that last year. I was still pretty Israel neutral last year as well. And I remember even then raising my eyebrow and thinking, that's not how that's supposed to go. It was like something like there were 2 hours left before the ceasefire was set to take place, and Israel just launched like 28 rockets. I do remember that. And then what did they do? Well, they had to be attacked back, and that's when they went, "Oy vey, we're the victims here. My God, they're coming to kill us all. See how it is dealing with our neighbors? They hate violence. Or they hate peace. They just want violence. They're after us. You gotta help us." Everyone saw it for what it was then, and we see it for what it is even more so now. But thank you for that $5 super chat tariff, and I appreciate that. Proposal for the new Israeli flag, says Black Sun, and it's the nuclear symbol. I love that. David Cooper says the Israeli government and people are different, just like the Americans are not Trump. We have to be fair about this. Yeah, well, same with Iran and their government. Yeah, well, the Israeli people and their government... Oh, I see what you mean, separating them out. Well, yeah, of course. There's no way that you implicate every single Jewish person living in Israel and say that they're all collectively a part of this. But, I'm not going to like put a disclaimer on that every single time. That should be a normal understanding. And again, what you'll have is you'll have disingenuous people arguing that, and they'll bring that to your attention. It's kind of like the abortion argument where it's like, well, what about the rape victims? Oh, okay. All right. We're going to talk about this, okay, I get it. Like, it happens. It's the same thing with Israel. There are actually, as far as if I remember correctly, it was something to the effect of 60% of the Jews in Israel don't actually even support this war. If I remember that correctly, or I could be conflating that with the American Jews living in America. But it does go to show either way, yes, the people are different from the government for sure. So I appreciate the point. Louis, 4187, stop everything before I'm having a hard time tonight with super chats. Not that I'm complaining, I'll happily take the money. But $5 super chat tariff from Louie, and he says, thanks for speaking out. It's courageous. Americans first needs to learn the truth. The New Testament. Yeah, the New Testament, which, by the way, is written in Greek. But I appreciate that $5 super chat tariff. Thank you so much for that. And I appreciate the compliment as well. Yes, it is somewhat courageous, but thankfully, I would actually say this: it's actually a little bit less courageous now to speak out like this than it was even just 5 years ago. And that's another sign, and that's another white pill for all of you people out there. That's the hope pill, the white hope pill out there of, hey, you know, this kind of stuff can be said a little bit more openly nowadays, and we should take full advantage of it and really dive in on saying it. So, but thank you for the $5 super chat tariff. I love Christ. I love Christ, says Brian Hall. So do I. I just don't love Israel like you do, because I actually read my Bible. But anyways, the split is happening, and the implications now that are going to be felt spanning all across MAGA are going to be felt with this split in the Trump administration. Large parts of MAGA, like conservative channels, for instance. This is what I've been noticing now. There's a shift. A lot of these large MAGA channels and conservative channels have been very hesitant to address the Israel thing, right? They built their base probably years ago, and in doing so, they focused only on Donald Trump and getting him in. And you know, Donald Trump obviously had support from the boomers who worship Israel, and Donald Trump had support from the Jews who wanted to vote for him. Donald Trump with MAGA being the coalition that it was of these anti-establishment mixed groups of demographics, you know, the libertarians, the moderates, some Democrats who thought progressivism was way too far to the left for them, and justifiably so, and then a lot of America Firsters. They built these channels up now and really never had to address the whole Israel occupying our government topic. And so they do their best. What you'll see is they choose basically to either make subtle hints about how possibly problematic Israel is in our government, or in all honesty, a lot of these channels have chosen overall to remain very silent on the topic altogether. It's really not profitable for them to alienate their large audiences, which is what would happen if you talked about it the way I do on this channel, right? And even at first on this channel, I openly just stated a few moments ago, last year when I started this channel, I thought myself to be more Israel neutral. Not because I wanted to sit on the fence, but in truth, despite watching Alex Jones since the age of 14, I just really hadn't formulated too much of an opinion on Israel. And then the Epstein files were released, and that really started to radicalize me. And then I saw this whole war play out, and then that was like no going back. It's like, okay, it is real. It is a problem. No pun intended. It is real. It is real. No pun intended. It is real, the problem, and it needs to be addressed. And it's a bigger problem than what I wanted to admit it was last year. And so here I am. And at first, I remember a lot of angry boomers were commenting on my stuff, and they couldn't believe I was taking the stance. And to them, I literally said, fuck you. I'm an American firster. And that's the choice they're going to have to make too. And that's really the implications of this divide, is because it's going to come from the top down. These large conservative channels and MAGA channels have had the privilege of being able to sort of ignore it and say, well, I just choose to ignore Israel. I just choose to say I'm neutral to Israel. And I could see a potential problem with AIPAC and the influence in our government, but there are other things to focus on, like immigration and, you know, whatever else. And when it comes from the top down now, when it comes from the very people that they've built their channels off of, J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, saying these things so openly, criticizing Israel so openly, now in turn these channels are going to be forced to make a decision on their own stance. And it's going to be an unavoidable topic. And that's what's so good about this. Regardless of where it's coming from, regardless of how let down you feel by Trump, or perhaps you never supported him to begin with, regardless of what you think about J.D. Vance, which I'm going to expand heavily on today because I am worried that, no offense, but a lot of the political chuds, a lot of the MAGA chuds out there, or even America First chuds out there, will get addicted to this notion that, well, Vance is backed by big tech, but he might be our guy because, you know, our biggest problem is Zionist influence. You know, he's saying he's right. Like, what he's saying is, so I'm going to address that. But in a minute, what I will say is, regardless of how you feel about it, it is helpful to see the people in power finally, for whatever their reasons may be, Be it that it might just be politically motivated. Midterms are on the way. They recognize what the youth likes and doesn't like. They might just be saying it to say it. I don't know. I can't be sure. But regardless, it is creating the spark that will lead to a bigger fire now. And the bigger fire will grow when these large conservative channels and MAGA influencers are also forced, as a result of their heroes, their Lord and Savior Donald Trump, their next Lord and Savior J.D. Vance, speaking so openly about it. This is becoming more and more major news, and it's becoming a more and more public divide, which is something I didn't actually foresee happening. I didn't think it would be possible to see a situation where it was this public. I knew internally, after this disaster of a war concluded and America surrendered like it did, I knew it would be an internal divide, but I thought it would be kept pretty secret. So I'll even admit it is shocking to see this amount of open criticism of Israel by Vance and Trump. And this is good. It's good for that reason objectively alone. But by doing this, with these big channels, by failing to take their stance and their weak approach, they're really not doing anyone any favors. So it is really beholden to them. They must take this stance if they actually care about America as much as they say that they do. Because it's all coming to a boiling point, and they're going to be forced to do it anyway. And it will be good when they do it. If some of them are as smart as I think they are, and they finally get to speak their piece and take a stance on this, it will help out quite a bit. It will help out America in general for that to happen. So, what we're seeing as well, you have, within the Trump administration, you have the Ted Cruz's, the Mike Huckabees, probably Pete Hegseth, Mike Johnson for that matter, and then conversely, it's J.D. Vance to a larger degree, Trump himself to some degree criticizing Israel. More curiously, this is what I really wanted to point out and dive into today. More curiously, where's Marco Rubio in all of this? And he's been taking a very silent approach. And this is what I want to discuss because this leads me back into J.D. Vance, and this leads me down the path I want to go down in regards to J.D. Vance to remind everybody of who J.D. Vance is. And to remind everybody, don't get too excited about the rhetoric being spewed in regards to Israel criticism. But let's go there. First, let me swig some water again. Because this is where it gets interesting, and I noticed this a few weeks ago. I made mention of this on the channel loosely. There's been a shift. There were signs a few weeks ago, in fact, that the Israel lobby was beginning to recognize that J.D. Vance, though the Republicans last year were really hailing Vance as the protege to Trump, and he was going to take the throne, the mantle from Trump in 2028. It would be a seamless transition. Trump would knock it out of the park, which he hasn't anyway. And then subsequently, Vance would just be lined up to inherit it all. This was the notion last year, around, March, February, April, even through May. His handling of Volodymyr Zelensky of the Ukraine, for instance, went over very well with a lot of Republicans. There was a lot on display with Vance where it was like he was being propped up in a way, right? But a few weeks ago, the shift really began to take effect on social media, and you could see it because it was all these public social media posts all of a sudden being made. And the reason why it was happening is they began to look at Vance, the pro-Israel lobby, the Zionists, the neocons, and they began to look at how Vance took the approach that he did in regards to this war. The reports were he was very against the idea of it from the start, spoke his piece to Trump about how he didn't approve of it or think it was a good idea, and then ultimately really tried to distance himself as much as possible from the Trump administration during the process of this. If you remember, actually, when did Trump appoint Vance to his anti-fraud department that should have been Elon Musk and Doge last year, but ended very quickly for obvious reasons? Well, it was during this war. It was almost as if to give Vance something to do that would maybe help, build up or maintain some of his pedigree in office and keep his reputation intact somewhat, knowing that Vance was the younger guy who probably had Middle East fatigue and couldn't support this war outright as a result. And that happens, and the Israel lobby takes note of that because all they care about is war. And that's because they use war to their advantage, and it's the only way Israel thrives, is with war and with being attacked constantly. They need their victim status to advance their cause. Without war, they have none of that. They don't know what to do with themselves with peace. So they look at Vance and they begin to realize this. And that's really, he's not the traditional neocon, so to say, that they want. And so the shift was noticeable a few weeks ago, where pro-Israel political commentators all over X were pretty heavily and subsequently basically speaking highly of Marco Rubio all of a sudden, referencing him in many cases as the only acceptable guy for the GOP frontrunner in 2028, saying, look at how organized he is. Look at how dedicated he is to Trump. He's not a panicking. He doesn't worry about this war. He knows Trump's going to make all the right decisions and win this war. And look at what he does in the Trump administration, how accomplished he is. He's doing 2 jobs at once and flawlessly at that. Look at how articulate he is. And you saw these posts. And all of that was happening while in some cases they were actually going as far to not only say that, but then put J.D. Vance down and say, I don't know if he's the guy, or he makes me sick, his weak stance on this. We don't need a weak leader like J.D. Vance in 2028. Iran only responds to strength like Marco Rubio would be able to dish out, as Marco Rubio learns under Trump now. That's the kind of stuff we saw. And now what we're seeing, weirdly, and I want to point this out, like I stated, at the beginning of this war, it was J.D. Vance who really distanced himself from the administration, tried to stay pretty quiet about all of this, dodged around a lot of questions regarding it, supported Trump as best he could as the vice president, right? He's trying to play both sides of it. But that's what we saw from Vance. Now it's Marco Rubio who's the one staying quiet, if you notice this. Where's Marco Rubio? Well, I don't see him standing beside Trump all that much, and he's not really out there in front of the cameras so much right now. He doesn't have much to say. He's not really taking questions. He is distancing himself somewhat in all of this. That goes to show something. That goes to show what's playing out right now, because Vance was against this war, and so he stayed quiet. Marco Rubio, without a doubt, was probably somewhat for this war, or at least in spirit. There's conflicting reports on that. Some people say Marco Rubio told Trump that he thought the Israeli intelligence presented to him by Benjamin Netanyahu, who for some reason was invited in the Situation Room, which shouldn't have never happened to begin with. Some reports indicate Marco Rubio told Trump he thought the Israeli intelligence was bullshit. And this is some of the same reports that indicate that Vance was against it, etc., and it seemed like pretty credible reporting in all honesty. But also what we know out of Marco Rubio with his political record is he's very hawkish on Cuba. He's more neocon-like by far than J.D. Vance probably would be, hypothetically. And he's more prone then to being more war hawkish on Iran as well, and by extent, probably more prone to working with Israel, right? So while Vance stayed quiet because he didn't approve of the war and knew the war would make him look bad, we did see Marco Rubio out in the forefront announcing all kinds of things, talking openly about the war, etc. Some say accidentally exposing Israel is the reason why we had to start this. I think that was a script. I think that was done on purpose. As time goes on, I'm more convinced of that. But Marco Rubio was the one in the forefront, and as a result, the Zionist Israel firsters and the AIPAC lobby, etc., were saying, well, look at Marco Rubio. He's the emerging star. We thought it was Vance, but it seems like it's going to be Rubio. But now that the MOU is going down in disastrous fashion, nobody's happy with it. Everyone, when they admit to themselves in their most private moments, in secrecy, admits this is a surrender of the U.S. to Iran. It looks bad. And Marco Rubio now, he doesn't have much to say. He's very quiet. And this goes to basically my point here. J.D. Vance, in my opinion, has almost been deliberately set up for failure. I think throughout a large portion of this Trump term, in all honesty. And really, that's highlighted during this war, because Vance was, as I've stated, was reportedly very against this war. And as a result of that, perhaps as a form of punishment for his stance, and worse yet, for being right all along about being against this war, perhaps he is being set up deliberately to look like a failure, or to look incompetent, or to form doubt. Perhaps he's being set up to fail in order to form doubt in the GOP voters' minds. Because J.D. Vance was the one, if you remember, sent to Islamabad to broker peace, of which he went through a grueling 21-hour process without sleep in order to try to obtain it. But even then, he was set up for failure, and I even reported on that at the time, and I said, well, a lot of good that will do. I know J.D. Vance, regardless of how I feel about his big tech connections, which I'll get to again for the record in a little bit here, regardless of how I feel about that, I know J.D. Vance earnestly will be going there in order to broker peace. I actually felt confident in at least J.D. Vance's sincerity towards that goal. However, he was sent with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, the two Jewish Zionists, who were very pro-Iran war. And they had been the ones trying to broker peace up until that point and had failed multiple times leading up to the vice president going there. So Vance goes there, but not without Witkoff and Kushner. Worse yet, the reports come in that was accidentally pretty much admitted to by Netanyahu himself that Vance was basically in a position where he had to take frequent breaks during the 21-hour process to call Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. And why would that be? Well, because again, Israel doesn't want peace, and they're so terrified at the prospect of peace that they are as insistent as possible in being in control. And the way they're in control is by having access to information. And what better source for information to come from than the vice president overseas trying to broker peace? So this all happens, and surprise, surprise, after 21 hours of negotiations, it fails. And J.D. Vance, once again, looks like a failure. He looks incompetent. And it even highlights even worse how he's got the soft stance, they say, on war. He doesn't want this war. He's anti-war, and he can't even get peace now. What a failure they want you to look at him as. He fails. And that's been the case with several instances with Vance as well, by the way. He was sent to India last year, I remember, to talk with Prime Minister Modi of India. That went nowhere as well, right? And perhaps that is J.D. Vance's fault because it's fucking India. But regardless, that happens then. And, J.D. Vance has been sent on these escapades, basically, with low probability of success. And even now, today, what's the breaking news I announced as I go live? I literally say it came in minutes before I was going live. The ceremonial signing between Mohammad Ghalibaf, the Iranian head speaker of parliament, and who? J.D. Vance, has now been canceled. Now, we know it's because of Israel bombing Lebanon against Iran's wishes, violating the MOU, and we know it's Iran playing 5D chess against Israel, using Trump as the chess piece by canceling it and saying we're pausing the MOU, we don't recognize it anymore now. But regardless, it's once again J.D. Vance who was set to fly over to Switzerland to meet Ghalibaf and sign the MOU ceremoniously. It's now canceled. Vance is not flying out there. And it's once again Vance's name associated with this, to some degree at least, right? And it really is as simple as this. Marco Rubio, actually hang on, let me stop everything here. Another super chat tariff from the Black Sun 14 for $10. Thank you for that. And he says, I don't support republicanism because it exposes us to infiltration. If we had a republic, there should be anti-Jewish candidates, unless a certain lobby was pew-pewing them down. Well, I thank you for the $10 super chat tariff, and I will say I understand where you're coming from on that, and it is in line with probably who you really like a lot, the painter. He did have a tendency to believe in that. He thought that capitalism, if I remember correctly, as well as republicanism, leaves too open of a window for Zionism to breach the government and breach positions of power. So I actually do understand where you're coming from on that. I don't obviously fully agree with you. I doubt you'll find that surprising. I know I've had you in my chat many times, and it seems like we're aligned on a lot of things, but I probably draw the line a little bit further than you do on stuff, I think, going off of your picture, your name, what you're talking about. I think that's obvious, but what it really comes down to, sadly, is the times that we're living in is really allowing people to identify every loophole that's out there, every problem in our country, how it's been exploited. And so you're not as far off base as what Republicans would probably like to believe that you are. And I will admit that. And I thank you for the $10 super chat tariff. There are a lot of problems. And some of them I don't even think our founding fathers anticipated because, sadly, at the time that they wrote all of this into effect, they believed in a much more moral society than the one we're currently living in. So much more educated, much more active, wouldn't tolerate anything. Pitchforks and muskets would have been brought out at the first sign of trouble, and that's no longer the case either. So I totally understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate the perspective. Thank you, Black Sun. Anyways, back on point. It really is as simple as this. Marco Rubio's staying quiet now. J.D. Vance looks like he's been set up for failure. Vance is the anti-war candidate, but he is big tech. Marco Rubio is the neocon, basically, I believe. And that's what it is. Marco Rubio, in 2028, we're going to have the primaries for the Republican Party. And at first, it was basically, without question, J.D. Vance was the guy next in line to succeed the Trump presidency and take the position, hopefully seamlessly, after a massive Trump success. That's no longer going to be the case for a multitude of reasons. This Trump presidency looks like it's going to bomb out. It doesn't look like it's going to be all that successful. I don't think Trump can recover at this point. I hope he does for America's sake, but it's doubtful. And so already the plan is ruined in that regard alone. But now Vance is being set up by seemingly many people internally in the administration to look incompetent. And instead, it's Marco Rubio now, the rising star they refer to him as. And he's going to represent, this is the divide now. And it is happening because of Israel, this war, etc. It's being exposed even more. But this is the divide, and this is what we're going to see ahead in 2028. Perhaps even showing itself in the midterms this year to varying degrees as well, but especially in 2028. The Republican primaries will come and people will make their choice. The Republicans will be very divided. MAGA will basically be dead by then because Trump won't be up for re-election, and Trump is MAGA. I mean, he really is. And the Republican Party will be in a position where it has to evolve. It's going to be changing drastically. And that's the divide. It's going to be the two, they're going to prime it this way, where it's going to be, well, either you're going to vote Marco Rubio, who represents the neocon agenda. He's more war hawkish on Cuba, which I don't know if I'd even disagree with the notion of Cuba. But subsequently, if he's a war hawk there, he's going to be more hawkish on Iran. And subsequently, as a result of that, probably a lot more pro-Israel. He'll be more prone to being Israel first, even if it's somewhat secret. Because by 2028, both candidates will sort of have to be critical of Israel. So with Marco Rubio, I think even to some extent, he'll have to criticize Israel. I think that's actually the reality we're staring down the barrel now. The Democrats certainly understand it already, which is why I think we're looking forward, and I don't mean looking forward optimistically or happily, but I mean we're looking forward into the future, less than 5 months from now, to a blue wave when it comes to the midterms, because the Democrats are understanding what to run on, and the Republicans aren't yet, not completely. So all that is to say, both candidates will have to be more critical of Israel, but it will be secretly Marco Rubio who will be the most prone to being Israel first, even if it has to be more quietly done behind the scenes should he become president. Meanwhile, you have J.D. Vance on the other side, and he's clearly going to be the more relatable, millennial Gen Xer type. He's 41, I think, turning 42 this year, if I remember correctly, which puts him right on the cusp of Gen X and youngest Gen Xers, oldest millennials. And so subsequently being a millennial Gen Xer, basically millennial, he's sick of foreign wars, as all millennials are. We grew up during this shit. Our childhoods were impacted by 9/11 and the Middle East wars. And he has the Middle East fatigue as a result of that. And Israel can't have a candidate like that. The Middle East is everything to Israel, and war is everything to Israel. It is what their success hinges off of. And that being said, that's what we're going to be facing in 2028. And that's why I want literally to frame it that way before I go into the next part here, because while it'll be J.D. Vance, as we now see him take his first steps towards doing so, it will be him who's the anti-war candidate. It will be him who has Middle East fatigue. It'll be him who's the relatable millennial, and he's a breath of fresh air because of his younger age. We just got done dealing with dementia Biden and, boomer Israel worshipping Trump. And it'll be J.D. Vance will be, 45 years old. It'll be like, oh, finally, somebody who's, still somewhat young, right? And he's anti-war too. And that's the concern. And that's what I want to get to here. Because despite all of that, it is upon us to remember that no, J.D. Vance will still not be our guy. Not at all. If you're a conservative and you're concerned with Zionist influence in our government and you're America first and you want a candidate who will put America first and will adopt a proper foreign policy of focusing only on our country and the Western Hemisphere and focusing on actual America first things like inflation, the national debt, the cost of living, the housing market, young people, their social issues, what people are going through in the millennial and Gen Z demographics, then no, JD Vance won't be our guy. And he will look like he's our guy, and he will talk like he's our guy. But it runs much deeper than what he's going to be talking about in regards to this topic, because JD Vance will ultimately be just an illusion of choice for Republican voters when it comes to the establishment GOP. It's almost too good to be true, is what the circumstance will be, because it is too good to be true. Many Republicans will think this time they've outsmarted the system. This time they've recognized, no, Marco Rubio's the neocon. We can't vote for him. He'll support Israel in their wars. He'll be hawkish on Iran. He'll get us involved in the Middle East. We can't have that anymore. And Republican voters will be made to feel smart for recognizing that. They'll say, we're not going to be fooled again. It's J.D. Vance who we want. He's against the war. Aren't you listening to what he's saying on his campaign? But in doing so, they'll completely be overlooking the fact that J.D. Vance is in favor of big tech. He's aligned with big tech. And sadly, beyond that, many people will hear this and they'll think, well, big tech seems a little shady, but what's the big deal? Well, because by big tech, I'm talking about Palantir. And this is what we need to get out here information-wise when it comes to Vance. This can't be spoken of enough. I see David Cooper, one of my founding members. He's going off right now because I know David Cooper he's big on this AI messaging. And it's because it needs to be said. It does. He says, correct, 100. AI, goodbye freedom. Exactly. We're going to get into this. Because Palantir is what's going to be associated with J.D. Vance. He's backed, funded, and supported, J.D. Vance is, by Peter Thiel. And really, he's backed by Peter Thiel now. He's associated with Peter Thiel is what I should say. Should he decide to run for president, which is actually not a 100% confirmation yet. We're not sure. Because J.D. Vance knows how disastrous everything's going with the Trump administration, and by association therein, he might not have a great chance of winning. He may take a gap year, or a gap 4 years. But there's a good chance he's going to run. And the fact that he's being so openly critical about Israel, I think, is his way of trying to rebuild momentum towards a 2028 presidential run. So let's assume he's running. He's backed by Peter Thiel. He's associated with them now. He will be funded and supported by Peter Thiel if he does. And Peter Thiel is a very wealthy Jewish billionaire donor to the Republican Party, to the Republican side of the aisle. And Peter Thiel is the owner of Palantir. And what is Palantir? Well, Palantir is the ultimate AI surveillance state system. This is what Palantir is. I've explained this in the past. Peter Thiel tends to be a bit of a nerd, I guess, in his everyday life. He likes Star Wars, he likes Jurassic Park, he likes all the movies, he likes Lord of the Rings. Palantir is the orb of Saruman. That orb is the orb that allows Saruman, the witch, to literally view all of Middle-earth. He can spy on Middle-earth using it, communicate with Sauron using it, and subsequently, anybody who actually is around the orb, specifically holding it really, can also be easily influenced by the orb of Saruman as well, known as Palantir. That's the orb's name in the movie. And that's really the stated reason why Peter Thiel named it this, because he's a Lord of the Rings fan, and he thought the orb of Saruman, the witch, was cool and representative of what he wanted his AI company to be, which is an AI surveillance state company. And we all know who Peter Thiel is too. And so it's the AI surveillance state, and it's the expansion, by the way, therein of AI data centers, which is something we're already seeing play out in America with a lot of, to Americans' credit, a lot of great resistance when you look at the news. One of my other loyal viewers here, who's always lurking, our resident cool boomer, Howard Clegg, just commented on my stuff this morning, that in his town, they rejected it and sent them packing. No data center. That needs to happen all across America. In my town, that sort of happened too, though sadly north of me, in the county north of me, there's been a data center built. It wasn't stopped. But that's what is happening right now. The data centers are being built for this reason. And in doing so, these data centers are destructive in many ways. You need to do your own research on that. I won't spend too much time covering that. But that's why they're being built now. They're being built in preparation for what is to come. And originally what was supposed to come, like I said, was Vance the golden boy, succeeding Trump's presidency, taking Trump's position as president. And because he's backed by Peter Thiel, this is all meant to come into fruition starting in 2028. And there's a lot of people, by the way, who really don't know or won't connect all of this together. That's what I'm going to do right now, because this is a classic controlled opposition play. It's really what it is. Again, if it's just Vance and Rubio, that's controlled opposition. The options may appear right now, especially, to be splitting apart, with Rubio now taking a more silent approach in light of the disastrous MOU being signed, but also being backed a lot by the pro-Israel lobby. The Israeli firster commentators on X are hyping up Rubio, and they're even disparaging Vance in the same breath. And as a result, it's sort of like the separate stances are happening right now. This huge fracture as a result of Israel's sabotage efforts of peace in the Middle East and their actions in general, and the American public becoming more educated, and that fact being known and observed by the elites. It's all splitting. And so the options they want you to think are genuine and real, and it's Marco Rubio and JD Vance, but ultimately they're going to fulfill the same vision. And at first, hearing that at first, you might think, oh, this is a crackpot conspiracy guy. This is the truth. The fork in the road is appearing right now, but it's not meant to remain split. That fork is going to go like this and rejoin right up into the same road. It's not going to stay apart. And it's going to rejoin much sooner than you think. Why? Because of Palantir's roots, which is not something I've gotten into yet. I've explained why we don't want an AI surveillance state, how it's anti-conservatism, how it's anti-freedom in general in the past. But Palantir's roots are really where we begin to connect the dots. Peter Thiel, the owner of Palantir, has deep connections with the intelligence communities. Palantir was literally built on CIA and In-Q-Tel seed money. Now, In-Q-Tel is the CIA's own venture capital arm, and it pumped about $2 million into the foundation and the startup of Palantir back in 2005. Now, what you have to understand is why that's significant. When the CIA pumps millions of dollars into anything, that isn't just a nice, generous donation towards something that's going to be great for America's future. That is the CIA, in doing so, giving their stamp of approval on a program that they're going to ultimately use in the future and find very useful. And this is the signal, this stamp of approval by the CIA in the form of funding something like Palantir, is the signal that opens up every other closed door across all of the upper echelons of society, the elites, all of the connections Peter Thiel needs. It's all opened upon seeing that stamp of approval by the CIA in the form of millions of dollars in backing. And it allows Peter Thiel to begin the process of developing, creating, and fast-tracking all of it within the Palantir program. Ever since then, by the way, Peter Thiel's company has also been built with constant close collaboration within the intelligence community. Intelligence community analysts have all had firm hands in the development and building of the Palantir program. And since Palantir has been backed by all of this, basically straight from Langley, they now have access to everything, because it's integrated in the intelligence community. And this means basically not just money, but I'm talking about like contracts and data access, the revolving door of the CIA and NSA officials providing all of their information and input as Palantir was built from the ground up using CIA-backed money. And Peter Thiel doesn't even try to hide any of this, by the way. He's actually remarkably open about all of this. That's how I know he's a nerd for Lord of the Rings and why he called Palantir Palantir. He's very open. He says all of this out loud, remarkably, or for the most part. I'm sure he is keeping his secrets. That's a Lord of the Rings meme for a Peter Thiel type nerd. Fine then, keep your secrets. I'm sure he does that, but he's very remarkably open, perhaps too much so, because he openly also states that Palantir is being built to help the government spy better. Okay, so he doesn't hide any of this. Now, the question you ask yourself is, spy on whom, right? The government's going to spy better because of Palantir. Whom will they be spying on? If you're naive, you would certainly just like to think it's going to be our enemies. Our government that exists to protect the people would never spy on us, would they? Of course, the answer is as obvious, sadly, as you would like to think it isn't, and it is. They're going to spy on us. This should be so obvious, because tied in with Palantir and the AI surveillance state and the increased demand and construction of AI data centers will be like what my other loyal viewer Diane commented on my video as well in regards to AI, the flock cameras. This is actually where Palantir is going to be playing a big part. There's going to be so much information flooding in that needs to be processed. It can't be processed by people. Flock cameras will be popping up all over all the major cities at first, and then eventually all over America as much as possible. America will be saturated by flock cameras, turned into a surveillance state, and the need for accurate and fast processing of all of this camera footage and of all of this information will be huge. And that's why data centers have to be everywhere, spanning across America, draining our water, dirtying our water supply, taking up our farmland, which was previously being used to grow food for humans, will now literally be an AI farm for processing power for the surveillance state. And so the flock cameras being associated with all this indicate to us who they intend on spying on. And really, it's all in the Palantir program writing. This is a pre-profiling system that they're working on. They openly identify that they feel like there will be a futuristic need for what they refer to as pre-policing, meaning that Palantir won't just rely on flock cameras that will indicate to them your habits or if you whatever you tend to do in public, but they're going to use your any criminal record you may potentially have, any driving record you have, your social media, everything you've ever said on the internet. Recordings of you that may have been captured of you saying anything controversial at all of it will be formed into various different profiles, individual profiles of Americans. And in those profiles, Palantir will be used as an AI system that runs off of the power of these AI data centers and is, using the flock cameras and is funded by the CIA and our intelligence communities. It will be using all of this to create pre-profiling risk assessments on Americans. And when needed, it will pre-police high-risk individuals, meaning you'll be investigated or called into the police station for interrogation, or who knows? I know it seems outlandish to say now, but never say never to this. Perhaps maybe just arrested ahead of time for your own good. This is the stated intent of Palantir. And worse yet, I'm going to finish connecting dots for you, because this is where most people won't take this. But truthfully, I've been reporting on certain actions being taken right now by our own government in Congress, even with a GOP majority. And this is where Section 224 of the 2027 NDAA fits in, for instance. And in addition to that, what I just covered the other night with Tom Cotton, now pushing for what is, I think, Section 222 or Section 121, Section 612 or Section 622 of the Senate Intelligence Act. That's where these are fitting in. And this is the dot that I doubt anyone else will be connecting right now. So let's go over that. Before I do, be sure to like the stream if you're enjoying this content, please. This information needs to get spread out there. Even if you don't like me being conservative, etc., I am here to get out the best, most high-quality information possible, and YouTube's algorithm is encouraged to push this out to more people with the like. So double tap your phone screens, hit the thumbs up button. It's free to do, and it really does help YouTube feel encouraged to push this out in the algorithm to more people who need to see this. Let's go over this. Section 224, as I've reported on. Why is this significant? And really what I'm going to do now is connect multiple dots for you and allow you to understand why, though J.D. Vance, because remember this, J.D. Vance is critical of Israel now, and he's anti-war, but big tech. This will allow you to understand why it's controlled opposition and why the choice will simply be an illusion. Because Section 224 of the 2027 NDAA, which already has passed through the lower chambers of Congress, by the way. It's already passed through that. It's moving on up through the chambers of Congress now. It's gaining approval, bipartisan fashion approval, by the way. Section 224 of the NDAA for 2027 proposes the idea of fusing Israeli AI, cyber, and autonomous weapons tech straight into our U.S. military and government. It's literally framed as data fusion and network integration with Israel. That's what Section 224 is of the NDAA. It wants to weave in all of Israeli tech. I broke it down in greater detail on a past episode 1 or 2 days ago. You should check that out if you get a chance. But it literally demands, in summary, it demands a position be appointed that is directly under the Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War, whatever it will go on to be called, which would be Pete Hegseth, for instance, right now. It demands that a position is appointed that works directly under that secretary. And in doing so is the number 2 spot by default in the Pentagon that can overrule and overpower all other positions within the Pentagon, all other offices, including the ones responsible for inspecting safety, establishing national security protocols, etc., security risks, threats, etc. This position will be second to the Secretary of War. And the job will be for it to be in that position. That person will be an Israeli czar. His sole job will be to fast track the Israeli integration process into the Pentagon and subsequently our military and government. And again, that's going to be AI, cyber, autonomous weapons, you name it. From there, that Israeli czar will also oversee the process of the construction of factories located in America that begin producing immediately and as quickly as possible all of this new tech with Israeli technology integrated into the mix. And that's where it's going to be data fusion and network integration. And big tech's going to have a huge part to play in that. Then you take Tom Cotton's more recent Section 612 of the Senate Intelligence Bill. And this bill literally proposes and would lock in, making it extremely hard to undo, permanent and enhanced sharing of intelligence between the CIA and Mossad. I covered that, yesterday or 2 days ago as well? Even going so far, by the way, as I covered the other day as well, to make it illegal going forward to restrict intelligence from the CIA to Mossad, and subsequently then the United States can no longer restrict or control what intelligence Israel has access to. This is being pushed by Tom Cotton, the Republican neocon Israel firster, and it's Section 612 of the Senate Intelligence Act. And by the way, you have data fusion, Israeli technology, AI, all being integrated or being proposed to be integrated under Section 224. And then you have Tom Cotton with Section 612 proposing that the CIA and Mossad basically merge together and blend together, despite Mossad representing the intelligence of a foreign country. Well, remind yourself, he wants the CIA and Mossad to blend together. Well, which intelligence community did I just tell you funded Palantir from the start back in 2005 in the form of nearly $2 million? Well, as it just so happens, that was the CIA. So in a world where all of this is happening, hypothetically, because it hasn't happened yet and we have to stop it and hopefully we do. But in a world where hypothetically this is all a reality now, Israeli tech is integrated into our country fully. They're woven in. The parasite digs deeper into the host, possibly never to be removed again. And in a world where our intelligence is now no longer a secret, when it comes to it being kept a secret from foreign governments and countries like Israel. In fact, it's shared. It's comparable to a community fridge in the workplace break room. You ever stick your lunch in there and you go to check on it 2 hours later and some fat ass fucking ate it? Well, that's the proposition here in Section 612 of the Senate Intelligence Act by Tom Cotton. Mossad can just raid the fridge anytime they want, indiscriminately pulling all the intelligence that the CIA has or any of our intelligence communities here in America and look through them. It is supposed to be restricted to Middle East intelligence, I will emphasize for the sake of accuracy. But even in doing that, you understand, or maybe you don't, but I'll make you understand, there are a lot of loopholes and there's a lot of ways Americans always wind up being compromised when it comes to those restrictions. And in this world where this is all happening, you then place a big tech, Peter Thiel funded and supported J.D. Vance presidency into 2028 through 2032, and maybe he gets a second term that lasts all the way until January of 2037, it would be, right? You can now see how all of this would start to shape up. And that's not even the end of the road. Because I haven't even gone into the other grim reality about all of this. Something else I've been reporting on this channel from time to time. Did a whole half of an episode on it already. And that is some of the legislation we're beginning to see be proposed and in some cases drafted and even voted on, like down in Florida with Randy Fine, who is aggressively pursuing this idea of anti-Semitism hate speech laws, even going so far as to get some of them passed. It's now a crime in Florida, for instance, to tape a picture of a swastika on a public building in Florida. Like a crime that's punishable by not just like a fine or community service, but like it's a crime punishable by prison time. Randy Fine wants to observe the IHRA laws, and he's ramping up the consequences for anti-Semitism. And some of it's passed already. Some of it has been ceremoniously signed in Israel by none other than Ron DeSantis, who I otherwise like as a governor. You put that into the mix with a J.D. Vance 2028 presidency backed by Peter Thiel, who owns Palantir, that will usher in the surveillance state, that was funded by the CIA, that is being proposed to be merged with Mossad by Tom Cotton, and also, while Section 224 is being proposed and Israel is integrating itself into our country and our military, and you understand just how severe all of this could get. And then you understand why I said the fork in the road that appears to be presenting itself now between Vance, the anti-war, critical of Israel candidate, versus Marco Rubio, who's eerily silent right now as the MOU looks disastrous, but definitely would be the more Iran hawkish, Cuba hawkish, neoconservative, pro-Israel type candidate. The fork appears to be there, but if all of this plays out the way that it looks like it possibly could be playing out, then there is no choice. There is no actual fork in the road. It's all an illusion. And really, in picking Vance over Rubio in this hypothetical 2028 Republican primary circumstance, you're just delaying by 4 to 8 years the inevitable of it coming fully circle, the road rejoining itself, and Israel then being in complete control. And all of this has to happen this way if you're a Zionist in Israel, because they understand fully and recognize outright the truth that millennials and Gen Z don't support Israel at all anymore whatsoever. Israel is only popular with millennials by 24%. It has a 24% approval rating with millennials, and that will be declining guaranteed in some of the upcoming polls, the polling data after all of this disaster. Millennials are going to hate Israel even more now. And Gen Z was already at 16% only when it came to approval. That will be lower too. And these are the future voters and future politicians of America. And that shift is coming in 2026 and 2028. It's already going to start happening. And Israel, as J.D. Vance so elegantly explained earlier, should not be criticizing their only ally left in this world. We were responsible for 2/3 of their defense over the last 3.5 months, according to our own vice president. And Israel knows this is true. And they also see the writing on the wall. And they also know that they need war in order to achieve their goals. But they can't get war without American support, and they won't have American support if they want war. So now what we're seeing is Israel, seemingly the Israeli government, jumping the gun even more, because the mask is completely off. And so now it's straight to the iron fist. And it's all being set up right now. So that's what I wanted to go over today. We'll end it there, honestly. I'll take a look at some chats if anybody has anything to say. I'd love to read some chats on this. I hope it's making sense for people. I hope I presented that well. This is a very important message, and I was glad to get it out there because I've been talking about the Iran war a lot, and this has to do with the Iran war, but finally it's about American politics again. And this is important because I am a conservative, but I'm not a MAGA cultist, I'm not a big tech supporter, and I'm not an Israeli government supporter. And I think a lot more people are starting to adopt that sort of position in America, but they can't be fooled because this is setting up a false choice. Louis says it sounds on point with me. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. 666 says stay true 9206. Yes, there is symbolism with that number in Israel, actually. I'm aware of that. Shavila says Israel has huge call centers. Sweden, Switzerland, and about 34 states use Israeli-based tech. That's probably true. I actually didn't even know that, but I appreciate you saying that. I died from COVID-19. Muslim Brotherhood in chat. Well, I'm not part of the Muslim Brotherhood, my man. I am an American nationalist. So I'm not a Muslim sympathizer. I'll just let you know that right off the bat. However, I will say, as I've said before, when you recognize what's actually happening, you're less bigoted, I guess I should say, against Muslims. In person, I always get along with Muslims. I've also said that. Like, I find them to be charming people and actually considerably more friendly. So, I'll also say that. But, you know. Lifeguard, 2009 Lifeguard, my moderator says the speed and volume of bad news for native-born American citizens is really overwhelming, and even more so for those Americans who happen to be white. This is all true. But we do not take the doomer pill here. This information needs to get out there so something can be done about it. And it really starts with the education of the voters. It starts there. Because I don't go so far down the rabbit hole as to sit here. I'll never sit here and tell you your vote doesn't matter. At some point we may live to see such times. I hope we don't. But we're not at that point right now. Because if we were, then they wouldn't care about any narratives. They wouldn't care about ending this war quickly. They wouldn't care about anything. They still rely on your votes. The votes do matter. You can go too far down the rabbit hole to where you're convinced it's all a theater being played out before your eyes, a theater skit, and your votes are just for show. I don't subscribe to that. I don't believe we've lost our nation that much to where our votes mean nothing. I think it matters. They know it matters, and that's why constantly, conveniently especially, months before any sort of major election, everything drastically switches. Sort of like it is now. The Iran war is now over. Trump's now criticizing Israel all of a sudden. So is J.D. Vance. That's probably not a coincidence. But if people are educated properly, and if people are taught to do more than just listen to what they hear, and are taught to do more than to just listen to what is being told to them by politicians, and to actually critically analyze and think through things like I just spent the last hour and 41 minutes doing, then we can really get good voters out there who can actually make a difference and vote for the good candidates. Because the last thing big tech or the Zionists wants, for that matter, is for an actual America First populist conservative candidate to rise up and take power. Trump was almost that guy, and they hated him for it at first. But they found the chink in the armor with Trump, and they've at least over the last 3.5 months, they won. They destroyed the anti-establishment MAGA movement. MAGA transformed into a sycophantic cult. Trump is worshipped as some sort of deity almost. He's praised as such by people like Lindsey Graham after winning his primary, and by people like that nutjob female pastor Paula White, I think her name is. Like, it's all part of the plan, and Trump as a result, after receiving hundreds of millions of dollars from Muriel Adelson, after nearly being shot in the head, all of this was collectively the chink in Trump's armor, I think. Can't ever know for sure, I guess. But that's what Trump almost was, and they despised him for it. In fact, if you remember right, all of even the neocon Jews were all never Trumpers, including Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro. All of that was the case, and even after they watched the Democrats' poor reaction to the October strikes on Israel, and they recognized that a conservative was more likely to be the guy that they needed in power in America, even then, who did they try to go for? They wanted Ron DeSantis over Trump first. And then when it was apparent it was going to be Trump no matter what, then you saw Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin fall in line. Like the good little goy. Well, they're not, well, they're Jews. Like the good little cucks to Israel that they are. Then they fell in line and became Trumpers. But they were always clearly stated never Trumpers. Because Trump, at least initially, represented what they didn't want. So that's what we need, and it won't come from Vance. We need a true anti-establishment, dark horse, America First candidate to rise up, and it's not coming from Vance or Rubio. It just won't. Marco looks more and more uneasy on camera, says Tomas. Yes, very true. Well, he's kind of always been that way, though. And both, to their credit, I'm not saying that they're both, like, Vance has some positives to him. It's just everything that he would do is too, you can't vote for him. And same with Rubio, but Rubio is a hard worker, for instance. I think that much is true. Like, you can see why they're successful, but nevertheless, it doesn't matter. It's what they represent, and how really they're just the illusion of choice that doesn't actually even exist. And that's why this administration, this Trump administration, needs to be destroyed. And that's why a blue midterm this year is actually going to be a good thing, potentially. It's at least going to be better than the alternative of winding up with only Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance as our options to choose from. Because if you didn't understand over the last however long I did this, they're not choices at all, and both of them lead to anti-America, pretty much complete change of way of life here in America. That's wholly unacceptable to anybody who's truly an American patriot or conservative, for that matter. Stop everything. $2 super chat tariff from Louis 4187. Thank you for that. He says, "Is Congress reform even possible?" I'll give you a little bit of a white pill. Call me naive here. I actually think it's almost inevitable. Almost. And that goes back to what I've stated when it comes to the young generations. If only 24% of millennials currently support Israel and only 16% of Gen Z do, and those generations are quickly going to become the majority of our politicians, then by default, I think you would basically assume that Congress is getting set to change quite a bit as boomers now die off and as a result lose power. Now, AIPAC will have to be identified as a foreign agent and will have to remove its influence entirely from this country in order to really guarantee that. But that being said, this is the battle of good versus evil, and I am of the belief that good will win, at least in the long run. And that's the clear pill, that's the hope pill. Call me naive. I could see why you'd call me naive. I wouldn't even fully disagree with you calling me naive, but I do see a great possibility of Congress reform happening kind of naturally as a result of the stark differences in generations. We're in the fourth turning. People need to read that book, The Fourth Turning. We're in the fourth turning. The establishment is getting set to crumble as the boomers who profited off of it and thrived off of it grasp on tightly to their precious values that built it. And the tighter they squeeze, the more, like squeezing sand, the more they lose of it as the inevitable happens and they're replaced. Let's see. Zekowitz08 says, "Do you think the idea of Greater Israel is a realistic geopolitical goal, or is it mostly a political slogan? What evidence supports either view?" Well, listen, I'm not going to debate I'm not going to debate with myself on here. But what I will say is the idea of Greater Israel a realistic geopolitical goal? No, it's not. We just saw why it's not realistic. We tried to help them out by bombing and attacking Lebanon or Iran, and it failed miserably for everyone. Now, the U.S. has had to essentially surrender to Iran. Trump's legacy is damaged, maybe ruined. America's reputation is damaged. The Pax Americana is in jeopardy. Our economy is suffering. Inflation's through the roof. The farmers are struggling. And cost of living's worse here across the board. In addition to that, Israel's now going to be in the worst position of all after this Memorandum of Understanding goes into effect, which is why they're so desperate to sabotage it beyond just the fact that they don't want war to ever end. It's because we're going to give now Iran hundreds of billions of dollars, which will strengthen them beyond belief and possibly turn them into a fourth emerging global power, which will be the ultimate balance and check system to Israel now. Israel wanted us to weaken Iran to remove the threat of them so they could pursue their goals. And in turn, what has happened is America's been made to look weaker than what we want ourselves to look. Our perception of our military strength has been ruined. Our military credibility is now worse in general. Our reputation has suffered. And Israel now is going to be even more compromised by Iran's existence because they're going to be infinitely more powerful. And now they're being forced out of Lebanon, or this peace deal, this MOU, will blow up. And now even Trump is turning on them, and J.D. Vance too. And the young generations will despise them even more. So how will they finish their Greater Israel project in those kind of circumstances? That's why it's not realistic. And the only way it's actually realistic is based off of everything I just explained, which I'm not going to recap. That was a long, lengthy process, but I hope it was informative. Because it's the iron fist is the only way now. They know this. What's done is done, and that's because the truth is permanent. The truth is written on all men's hearts, and it leaves a permanent mark on you when you hear it. Once you hear truth like I just dished out to you guys for the past 2 hours almost, you cannot unhear it, and by default, you cannot unsee it. And as a result of that, it changes your frame of mind and perspective of everything. So going forward, now everything they do is also in the light, and you see it, and you anticipate it. And like me, you start to become a little bit better at predicting it even, which then forces you to double and triple down on your belief of how right you are, because you can then predict what they're going to do and be right like I am. I am making you guys smart like me. But it's true, and that's why all of this now, it's either the iron fist or nothing. They cannot achieve any of that without America, and they're losing America. So that's my belief on that. Richard Muir says JD Vance is on his third name change. I thought he changed his name twice. I didn't know he changed it 3 times. That's also very interesting. David Cooper says social. Yeah, see, and I didn't even go over that, but that's implied, I think. But I'm glad you're stating it, Cooper. David Cooper, a member on this channel, says social credit scores, digital IDs, digital currency. They can control how you use cars. They can control. He says, yep. He says so on point with the fake choice illusion of choice candidates. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. He says they will put up. Big tech is pushing full speed ahead with their agenda, and we need to stand together now on this. Yes. The window has not closed. It is not too late to save America, and it's not too late for us to do something about it. But it will require community. It will require us uniting in some way. You know, on this channel, as a conservative, I can't advocate that we unite with liberals, not when it comes to their progressive values. Morality is just too different between us at this point. And they don't recognize how useful the tool they are to the Zionist agenda when it comes to open borders, immigration, and everything else that's being used against America on a domestic front. That being said, sorry, we lost signal there for a second. That being said, the unity does have to come with Americans in general, patriots who are willing to unite together to stand against AI. And in doing so, we also have to unite together and educate ourselves when it comes to who we vote for and who we choose to support as candidates and what we're looking for in candidates. That should be even more important. Michael Cox, 6654. Good to see you, Michael. He says, no term limits, same old game. Public trust is gone. Correct. When does the Antichrist get unveiled? Says I died from COVID. I don't know. And well, here's the thing. I am what you call an millennialist. I am not a premillennialist, which views Revelation as mostly being in front of us. I believe in being an millennialist. I believe basically that all of that stuff in Revelation is basically either been played out, or we're in the middle of it, or what have you, or in many cases it's cyclical. So the Antichrist perhaps is not just going to be one figure, but in my opinion, looking back on history, the Antichrist has been several figures already. It's called an Antichrist spirit. So you can look at Emperor Nero in the 1st century as an Antichrist figure. And you could look at other figures that have risen up throughout the course of time in the name of tyranny, for the most part, as Antichrist figures. They were inherently not Christian. They worked against the Christian values. And in doing so, they deteriorated society, and they were full of tyranny and ill will towards humanity in general. People suffered under them, and it advanced the will of evil in many ways. And it's cyclical is really what it is, or rhythmic, as some people would say. People like to say history repeats itself. Well, maybe not fully, but it's rhythmic. And every time it's rhythmic, we see the same patterns unfold where, yes, inevitably, some sort of Antichrist spirit rises up and takes control in large part of portions of the world. And people suffer as a result of it. But in that cycle is where we derive hope from, because good has always risen up to counter it. Now, what I believe is an amillennial is that cycle will repeat itself as we live through the 1,000-year kingdom rule on earth right now. Our goal is to advance the kingdom of God now, and in doing so, we are living through that promise right now of the earth. We are God's soldiers. We are here to advance his kingdom, and in doing so, we spread the goodness on the earth that allows the world, or the earth at times, to rise up and beat these Antichrist figures as they rise up. And what I believe is, rhythmically, that repeats itself And you never know when it's going to end. That's why the Bible is clear. No man knows the hour or time, because it will keep repeating itself out. And every time generations will sit there and believe that their generation is the last, and that this is it, and this is the time, this is the end of the world. But every generation that thought that thus far has died. And so it's important to not get so obsessed with Revelation that you adopt almost a nihilist view and believe, well, none of it matters. I'm going to heaven, God's coming back, and this world's coming to an end anyway. That defeats the purpose. And so you can never allow yourself to get too obsessed with Revelation, which is hard to understand and widely debated. And so that's what gives us hope to continue on and to expect. I expect I will live until I'm 85 or 90, and then I will die, and then I will go to heaven. That is my expectation, and I will live my life as such, because I believe I'm down here with a divine purpose assigned to me by God, to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world, and in doing so, I fulfill my purpose and advance God's kingdom. And in doing that, I help to preserve the earth and fight evil. That is my goal as a human being, and I plan on doing that for a full life and then dying of natural causes. I do not envision a world where I am raptured. I don't even believe in the rapture. But furthermore, I don't believe I'm going to live in a world where Jesus has to come back, though that is a possibility. And that's my stance on that as a non-millennial. We recognize that this just pattern repeats and repeats and repeats until eventually it is the end finally. But we don't know when that will be, and we don't know if it'll be in our lifetime. And you can argue AI is nothing unlike anything the world's ever seen before, and this time it's faster and it's going to advance all of it quicker, and there's no counter to it. But I don't think that's even true. But that's my stance on that. Hopefully that makes sense to people. I know not everybody that follows me or watches is religious or Christian, but that is my stance. BeckFan77 says, what the fuck is the fourth turning? Let me Google that. Yes, BeckFan. And BeckFan, I can tell one of my members, being a member especially, means you're smart, but I can tell you're a well-educated guy, so have fun reading that book, because it will help you out a lot in your understanding of what's happening culturally in America. Very significant book to read, and really does explain everything pretty well. And actually ties in pretty well with what I just said about even the rhythmic cycles based off of the Antichrist, for instance, in the world. The Fourth Turning is a book that's not inherently a religious book, but really does kind of also expand on that idea of the first, second, third, and fourth seasons of society and of a culture, and how just like the seasons repeat, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1 again. It happens here in every country, especially in America, and we already have been through the first, second, and third, and fourth now. The fourth is ending. The fourth season, winter, is ending, and in its place will be spring, and new establishments will rise up with the new generations. That it explains why the generation gap is so obvious now when it comes to millennials and Gen Zers versus the boomers. And Gen X is, no offense, they're the overlooked generation. They're actually pretty cool when you talk to them. But anyways, that's The Fourth Turning. It's a book I highly recommend people read, because it will give you a lot of clarity on what's happening. Pax Israel. Yeah. Free healthcare for Iran paid for by you, the American citizen. God, don't say that. Don't say that, Cooper. Trump is the Russian and Chinese biggest asset. And the worst part is unintentionally so. But I won't disagree with you entirely there, Shivila. Macron checks all of the boxes of the biblical archetype of the Antichrist, says Stay True. I doubt that. The Bible is subject to interpretations. That's yes, certain books are. Some things are not subject to interpretation, like I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That's very clearly direct and not up for interpretation at all. But certain things in the Bible are absolutely up for interpretation, especially when you're talking about a book like Revelation that was written mostly from dreams of the future. So, yeah. Now, I think once you look at it the way I do, where it explains the rhythmic, cyclical nature of things, then it actually makes a lot more sense. And that's why, again, I'm not a premillennialist. I don't believe that Revelation is entirely just a one-time future event prophecy that's all destined to be played out still, and then the end. I don't believe that. I believe it is an example of the cyclical nature of governments, society, countries, and people in general. Trump has done to America what Russia and China planned. We'll see, Michael Cox. We'll see. Because, Michael, I've explained the silver lining in this. As humiliating as all this is with Iran now, the silver lining could be a golden opportunity if Trump has the clairvoyance to take it and focus on America first for real. So I'm doubtful on that, but that is the opportunity. And certainly if Trump won't take it, it could be a great opportunity in 2028 if we can get a conservative president in who's not J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio. And that really is part of the equation in all of this. When you hear about the strategy of voting Democrat intentionally, it's Nick Fuentes who came up with that strategy, I believe. And that is the strategy. People can't understand it. They get very mad at the idea of it. But the strategy is to just finish destroying this corrupt administration now so that Marco Rubio's reputation is by default shattered after being associated with it. Same with J.D. Vance. They have no chance of being establishment plants then. They can't run. They won't be popular. They'll be despised for being a part of the Trump administration. And a midterm blue wave will ensure that because Democrats will get in and they'll form their committees and they'll do their investigations and they'll put out all the dirt on the administration possible and they'll grill them to no end and they'll make them look bad about the war, about Epstein, all of it. So that's the plan, and I can understand why that's the plan, because it does open the window for actual real America First candidates to rise up in place of what would be J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio. I died from COVID says yes, but it was also convenient to solve America's foreign policy issues. Well, if you're talking about the silver lining in all of this, if that's what you mean, yes, this was helpful in that regard too, because now people can understand why I say the Monroe Doctrine so much on this channel. Stay True says Mark of the Beast, Quantum Dot, Bioluminescent, you probably meant Luciferian technology, Luciferus technology, patent and owned by Bill Gates. Yep. Even the Mark of the Beast has been on repeat throughout history too, though. That's why I mean I'm a millennialist, and that's spelled A-H millennialist. It's because even the Mark of the Beast, there's been examples in the past of people who could not buy or sell without taking some form of a Mark of the Beast. So even then, I mean, we kind of started almost seeing it form that way during COVID, the vaccine passports and the masks and everything else. So they were pushing for it somewhat then. And really the true marker is, if you want to know what you're made of, the true marker is by how much did you resist that time. Everyone has an agenda: pharmaceutical, MAGA, Democrats, big tech, food, even pesticides and transportation. Very true. There's a massive uphill battle for America First people in this country. That is absolutely true. We have a lot to overcome. David Cooper says, great show again. This one was particularly well done. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. I had a feeling it was going to be a banger. Be sure to share it with people who need to see it. I'll clip the video portion of me explaining why J.D. Vance is a bad pick, and I'll put it up as a regular video on this channel. But in the meantime, be sure to like the stream if you enjoyed that. Double tap your phone screens. Hit the thumbs up button. I appreciate that. Be sure to subscribe and consider joining my membership program. That is new to this channel and will be coming with a lot of members exclusive content perks, members only videos, members only YouTube shorts, depending on what tier you pick. And that's important too. When you're a member, go check out my first community members only post so you can understand there are 2 different tiers of memberships and they are very different and they do provide different perks. And I don't want people to be too confused on that. So be sure to check out that post if you're a member or becoming a member, and consider joining today. It's cheap and it supports the channel, and you'll get a lot of added value. But if not, subscribing is free, liking is free, sharing is free, and all of that really helps out the channel the most. So other than that, I appreciate my super chat donors today, of which we had a lot: Louie Lou and Black Sun, and can't even remember all of them at this point, but I appreciate the super chat donors. Big shout out to my members. Thank you, the Ghost. He's a tier 2 member. Appreciate him. Thank you, Beck Fan, David Cooper. Thanks to my mods like Lifeguard, etc. Appreciate all of you guys as well. Spartacus. Glad to see you guys in chat. And as always, glory to America. God bless the USA, and may God bless all of you as well. I'll be back here live tomorrow at around 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, so be on the lookout for that. Take care.